Boom! The sound ripped through the tranquil seaside morning, not the gentle lull of waves I'd grown accustomed to, but a gut-shaking, earth-shattering blast that vibrated through the very foundation of my meticulously and perpetually cluttered garage. It was the sound of righteous indignation, a defiant roar against the absurdity that had just unfolded. And it was coming from the Coast Guard cutter horn I'd somehow rigged up on top of the town's water tower. My name's Mark, and 2 minutes earlier, I'd discovered that HOA Karen, Brenda Sterling to be precise, had effectively hidden the tsunami alarms in our coastal paradise. It started subtly, as true disasters often do. I was jolted awake not by the usual drone of early morning traffic from the highway, nor the distant squawk of gulls squabbling over breakfast. No, what woke me was the unnatural sound of no sound. Just silence. An eerie, heavy quiet that pressed in on the ears, making the air feel strangely thick. My eyes snapped open. Sunlight, hazy and diffused, was already filtering through the blinds, painting stripes across my bedroom wall. Too quiet. Definitely too quiet. Then, the low, disquieting whisper of a pre-recorded emergency broadcast from my phone cut through the stillness, vibrating on the nightstand. It was a calm, almost robotic female voice, chilling in its placid delivery. Tsunami warning for coastal areas. Please seek higher ground immediately. My heart did a backflip, a frantic flapping fish in my chest. I live, quite literally, on the coast. My 2-story house, which I'd sunk most of my semi-retired marine mechanics savings into, stood proudly just 3 blocks from the beach, close enough to smell the salt and feel the ocean's breath. And those fancy new tsunami alarms the city had installed last year, after that scare in Oregon? Crickets. Nothing. Not a peep. The automated voice on my phone repeated its grim warning, but still, the real-world sirens remained stubbornly, terrifyingly silent. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," I muttered, scrambling out of bed. "I'm Mark, pushing 40, give or take." I'd moved to this picturesque and perpetually drama-filled coastal community, Seabreeze Cove, a couple of years back. The idea was to escape the grime and grind of the city, to finally find some peace and quiet, and maybe, just maybe, to finally get around to fixing up that classic wooden sailboat, the salty siren I'd inherited from my old man. I pride myself on being prepared for anything. It's a skill I honed over years of wrestling with fickle marine engines, navigating unpredictable seas, and generally dealing with the kind of mechanical stubbornness that would make lesser men weep. I've got a gruff exterior, sure, a perpetually rumpled look that often gets me mistaken for someone who just rolled out of bed, which, to be fair, is often the case. But deep down, I've got a soft spot for this community. Even if it drives me absolutely, irrevocably nuts on a daily basis. Seabreeze Cove. The name itself promised serenity. What it delivered, however, was a relentless barrage of petty regulations, passive-aggressive newsletters, and the ever-present, suffocating embrace of the Seaside Serenity Homeowners Association. Our neighborhood was a postcard of manicured lawns, identical pastel houses, and precisely trimmed rose bushes. A veneer of idyllic perfection that hid a simmering cauldron of judgment and control. The HOA, with its iron-fisted leadership, ruled over everything from the permissible shade of your outdoor paint to the length of your lawn gnomes. My particular brand of chaos, a boat trailer that occasionally found its way into the driveway, a workshop perpetually spilling over with marine parts, a healthy disregard for their quarterly curb appeal inspections, made me a frequent target. And at the very top of the HOA's meticulously organized food chain was Brenda Karen Sterling. Brenda was a woman who could sniff out an unapproved shrub at 50 paces. Her perfectly coiffed blonde bob and perennially pursed lips were the very embodiment of suburban authority. She was a stickler for rules, obsessed with aesthetics, and had a particular, laser-focused vendetta against anything she deemed unsightly or disruptive. My boat trailer, the salty siren, seemed to offend her on a deeply personal level. We'd had several discussions. I remembered the installation of the new tsunami alarms like it was yesterday. The city had made a big show of it. Public meetings, informational pamphlets, the whole 9 yards. I'd seen the flyers, read the bold print. Finally, I'd thought, something genuinely useful from the city council. But then I also remembered Brenda, front and center at one of those meetings, leading a very vocal protest against their industrial appearance and the blight on the charming aesthetic of our beloved neighborhood. She had gone on and on about visual pollution and unnecessary noise. I'd shrugged it off then, just another one of Brenda's bizarre crusades. But now, as the emergency alert blared softly from my phone and the ominous silence persisted outside, the pieces started to click into place. The missing alarms, the eerie quiet. Oh, Brenda, what have you done? I threw on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, my heart hammering against my ribs. I practically ran out the front door. The air was salty, humid, and unsettlingly still. No usual morning breeze. I looked up and down the street. A few neighbors were starting to stir, some peeking through curtains, others emerging onto their porches, looking confused, fumbling with their phones. Still no siren. No flashing lights from the city's brand-new, supposedly top-of-the-line tsunami warning system. Nothing but the chirping of crickets that clearly hadn't gotten the memo. I tried to call the non-emergency city line, just to confirm what my gut was screaming. Got an automated message about unprecedented call volume and a polite suggestion to remain calm and await further instructions. Calm? My blood was boiling. Panic, a cold, slimy tendril started to snake around my gut. My eyes narrowed. Brenda. Driven by a growing suspicion that felt more like a certainty, I marched straight over to Brenda Sterling's immaculately manicured lawn. Her rose bushes, perfect even in this pre-dawn light, seemed to mock me with their flawless beauty. I pounded on her door, ignoring the "Please do not disturb before 8 a.m. sign. Brenda, clad in a silk robe that probably cost more than my boat, opened the door, her perfectly coiffed blonde bob already in place, her lips already pursed in irritation. She looked like she'd just stepped out of a catalog, even at 6 a.m. "Mark, darling," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that could curdle milk. "Is there some sort of emergency? It's rather early for enthusiasm." Her eyes, usually narrowed in perpetual disapproval, widened slightly as she took in my disheveled state. "Brenda," I bit out, trying to keep my voice even, despite the rising tide of adrenaline and anger. "Where are the tsunami alarms? My phone just got a warning and I don't hear anything. The city's not broadcasting anything." Her lips tightened further, forming a thin, disapproving line. "Mark, darling, there's no need for hysterics. The city made an executive decision. Those hideous monstrosities were a blight on our property values. They've been relocated." My jaw dropped. "Relocated, Brenda, there's a tsunami warning. This isn't about curb appeal, this is about people's lives." I gestured wildly towards the silent street. "The city assured us it was merely a precaution," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "A highly unlikely scenario, really. And besides, we have our bylaws to uphold. Section 4, subsection C, paragraph 7. No permanent structures exceeding 3 feet in height, not including primary residences, shall be erected within 50 feet of a residential property line without express written consent from the HOA board, provided such structure does not obstruct scenic views or create undue noise pollution. Those alarms were an eyesore, Mark, and frankly quite noisy during their weekly tests, a terrible distraction. She actually shivered with distaste at the thought. Noisy during their tests? I sputtered, my voice rising. They're supposed to be noisy during a tsunami. You're telling me you had the tsunami warning system removed because it violated some bogus aesthetic clause? Brenda drew herself up, a picture of indignant righteousness. Mark, watch your tone. The HOA has the community's best interests at heart. We believed the visual impact of those industrial towers outweighed the extremely remote risk of a natural disaster. We informed the city, of course, and they were quite amenable to a temporary removal and storage until a more aesthetically pleasing solution could be found. She actually believed she was doing the neighborhood a favor, dismissing the tsunami warning as an overreaction, a mere inconvenience to her perfect landscape. I stared at her, speechless for a moment. My mind reeled. She hadn't just protested their installation. She'd gotten them removed. All of them. Because they were unsightly. The sheer, unadulterated absurdity of it slammed into me. I wanted to shake her, to scream. But then, a different kind of thought started to bubble. An idea. A very, very loud idea. I turned away from her, shaking my head in disgust. This is unbelievable, Brenda, just unbelievable. I pulled out my phone again, furiously dialing 911, got put on hold, then transferred. Then, finally, a very calm and clearly overwhelmed dispatcher's voice came on the line. Sir, we understand your concern, but we're prioritizing evacuations in areas where sirens are active. We trust residents will use common sense and heed official alerts. I slammed my phone down, the screen cracking slightly. Common sense, huh? I muttered, looking directly at Brenda, who was now primly tidying an imaginary wrinkle on her robe. Right, because that's clearly abundant around here. I stormed back to my house, ignoring Brenda's indignant huff. The air outside felt heavier now, charged with something I couldn't quite name. I looked out at the ocean, the usually placid surface now oddly agitated, a darker shade of gray, with whitecaps forming rapidly further out. My old sailboat, the Salty Siren, bobbed gently in the harbor, a symbol of simpler times. My eyes lingered on it. The Salty Siren? Siren. Then a light bulb flickered. Not gently, but with the incandescent, blinding flash of 1,000 watts, a memory, long dormant, sparked to life. The massive, industrial-grade Coast Guard cutter horn I'd acquired years ago. Salvaged from a decommissioned vessel I'd helped dismantle. It was a beast, designed to cut through fog and gale, to be heard for miles. It was stored in my garage, a quirky, very loud piece of memorabilia I'd always meant to find a proper use for. I'd even jury-rigged it to run off a powerful marine battery, just for occasional, and highly illegal, I admit, fun during particularly frustrating days. A mischievous, almost maniacal glint appeared in my eye. Brenda wanted silence? Oh, she was about to get the opposite. I practically dove into my garage, a chaotic wonderland of tools, spare parts, and the occasional half-finished project. It was a treasure trove of marine ingenuity, and right now, it held the key to the entire neighborhood's future. I tripped over a rogue propeller, barked my shin on a rusty outboard engine, and sent a cascade of wrenches clattering to the concrete floor. "Move it, Mark! Move it!" I chastised myself. I dug frantically through stacks of dusty tarps and forgotten crates. There it was, the horn. It was even bigger than I remembered, a gleaming chrome behemoth that looked more like a cannon than a sound maker, a truly magnificent piece of engineering. Beside it, the hefty marine battery, charged and ready, hummed with latent power. Okay, I muttered to myself, dragging the horn out. Plan A was talk. Plan B was, well, I guess Plan B is loud. A quick internal monologue accompanied my furious movements. This was crazy. It was probably illegal, definitely illegal, highly illegal, but what choice did I have? The city was overwhelmed. The HOA had sabotaged the official warning system. People were still oblivious, thinking they were safe in their perfectly manicured little bubbles. This horn was the only way to get people's attention, to blast through the serene ignorance and the HOA's aesthetic tyranny. I worked fast, fueled by adrenaline, panic, and a healthy dose of righteous indignation. The horn was heavy, seriously heavy, and loud. Oh, so loud. I pictured Brenda's face. That only made me work faster. I needed to get it somewhere high, somewhere visible, somewhere everyone would hear it, even over the increasingly agitated roar of the ocean. My house was 2 stories, sure, but Brenda had threatened me with fines for even an improperly hung flag. Plus, it just wasn't high enough for this kind of job. I looked across the street, past Brenda's prize-winning petunias, past a few more rows of identical houses. And then I saw it. The town water tower, a colossal steel sentinel rising above the tree line, the highest point in the immediate vicinity. Perfect, I breathed, a wicked grin spreading across my face, and definitely, absolutely, 100% against bylaws. The water tower was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Standard deterrence for bored teenagers, not for a man on a mission. I chucked the heavy marine battery over first, wincing as it landed with a dull thud. Then the horn. That took more effort. It was unwieldy, awkward, and surprisingly aerodynamic. I heaved it over, nearly impaling myself on the barbed wire in the process. Ow, damn it! I cursed under my breath, my jeans snagging. I scrambled over the fence, grunting with effort. My back groaned in protest. This is what happens when you spend too much time fixing boat engines and not enough time at the gym, I muttered, shaking my head. I got to the base of the tower, looking up at the daunting ladder that stretched endlessly into the sky. It was a dizzying climb, each rung cold and metallic under my hands. I slung the horn over one shoulder, its weight surprisingly cumbersome, and carried the battery precariously in the other hand. Just like old times, Mark, I wheezed, referring to my youthful indiscretions involving scaling things I shouldn't have. Every muscle in my body protested. My lungs burned. The wind picked up, tugging at my shirt, making the ascent even more precarious. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached the top platform. The view was breathtaking and terrifying. Below, the quiet, unsuspecting neighborhood spread out like a miniature model. Houses clustered together, tiny cars parked neatly in driveways. The ocean, however, was no longer just agitated. It was ominously darkening, churning, a restless beast awakening. I could see the horizon line disappearing, replaced by a strange, glassy smoothness that always precedes a major wave. I quickly surveyed the platform. It was a decent size, providing enough space to secure the horn and battery. My hands, surprisingly steady, connected the final wire. The horn, facing squarely out towards the sleeping community, looked impossibly huge, a metallic trumpet poised to wake the dead. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the salty air filling my lungs. This was it. And with a defiant grin, a mix of sheer terror and exhilarating triumph, I pressed the button. Boom! The sound was deafening, a visceral, earth-shaking blast that ripped through the quiet morning. It wasn't just loud, it was physical. The air vibrated, my teeth rattled. The whole water tower platform seemed to hum with the raw power of it. The sound, raw and primal, cut through the deceptive calm like a hot knife through butter. Below, the chaos erupted. Dogs barked frantically, a symphony of canine alarm. Car alarms, triggered by the sheer decibel level, wailed in an overlapping chorus. Startled neighbors in various states of undress. Bathrobes, pajamas, tangled hair, spilled out of their houses onto their lawns, blinking in confusion, craning their necks. A collective gasp, a ripple of realization rose from below. Birds scattered from every tree, a cloud of frantic wings silhouetted against the brightening sky. I grinned triumphantly, the wind whipping through my hair, a madman on a mission. The sound faded, leaving a ringing in my ears. But I wasn't done. I gave it another blast, then another, a series of booming warnings, ensuring everyone knew this wasn't just a random noise. People started pointing, looking at the tower, then back at the ominously darkening ocean, a dawning horror in their eyes. The emergency alerts that had gone unheeded suddenly made sense. Evacuation routes, previously ignored or dismissed as overkill, now became terrifyingly relevant. It didn't take long. Before the echoes of the third blast had even fully faded, I heard them. Sirens. Not the tsunami kind, sadly, but the unmistakable wail of police cruisers. 2 patrol cars, lights flashing, screeched to a halt below the water tower, kicking up dust on the gravel road. "Great," I muttered. "Now they show up." A cop, a burly guy with a no-nonsense demeanor I recognized as Officer Miller, stepped out, a megaphone already pressed to his lips. "Sir," his voice boomed, distorted by the megaphone, "this is the police. Please come down from the water tower. You are creating a public disturbance." I cupped my hands around my mouth, shouting back, "There's a tsunami coming! Brenda hid the alarms! She hid them!" Another officer, a younger woman with a tired expression, Officer Jenkins, stepped out of the second car. I saw her turn to Miller, a look of dawning comprehension on her face. "Brenda Sterling? The HOA president? She actually did that?" "Yeah!" I yelled, gesturing wildly towards Brenda's silent, immaculate house. "She said it was unsightly. Now everyone's still in bed. We're about to be swamped." Officer Miller shook his head, running a hand over his face. "Sir, we understand your concern, but scaling a municipal water tower and sounding a marine horn is a federal offense. We need you to cooperate." "Cooperate?" I scoffed. "You want me to cooperate? I just saved your asses, and everyone else's. Go check the harbor, Miller. The water's moving. Tell Brenda I said you're welcome." The officers were caught between protocol and the very obvious, rapidly unfolding emergency. They probably thought I was a certifiable lunatic, but they could also see the rising water, the growing panic on the streets, and the steady stream of confused, then panicked neighbors finally piling into their cars. There was a comical back and forth, with me refusing to come down until I was sure people were evacuating, and the officers trying to figure out if I was a public menace or a reluctant, extremely loud hero. They were clearly annoyed, but I caught a flicker of grudging respect in Miller's eyes. Just then, a wave, larger than any I'd ever seen, hit the beach, sending a spray of water high into the air. It wasn't the monster wave everyone feared, but it was enough. Enough to swamp the first row of beachside homes, enough to send a clear message. The sight of it sent a ripple of absolute terror through the crowd below. All hesitation vanished. Cars that had been slowly inching forward suddenly floored it, a frantic exodus finally truly beginning. The Coast Guard horn had worked. It was messy, it was loud, but it had worked. I finally descended, a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration flowing through me. I reached the bottom of the ladder and was immediately met by Officer Jenkins, who, to her credit, cuffed me politely, almost apologetically. "You understand, sir? We have to—" Yeah, I sighed, offering my wrists. "Just make sure Brenda gets her fair share of the blame." At the precinct, It was a chaotic scene. Dispatchers were barking orders, phones were ringing off the hook, and the coffee machine was working overtime. I was booked for public disturbance, resisting arrest, which I mildly disputed, arguing I was simply waiting for the emergency to pass, and a few other vague charges. But as soon as my cuffs were off, the officers were also taking statements about the missing alarms. News was starting to trickle in about the tsunami's impact further down the coast, more severe than in Seabreeze Cove, validating my frantic actions. The officers, having confirmed Brenda's actions with the city, were now less concerned with my crime and more with the official investigation into her stunning lapse of judgment. Then Brenda Sterling was brought in. Oh, it was glorious. She entered the precinct like she was gracing a charity gala, her chin held high, her perfect hair still miraculously intact. But the veneer quickly cracked. She tried to maintain her composure, citing bylaws, talking about her vision for the community. But the officers, weary and stressed, weren't buying it. A detective, a grizzled veteran named Ramirez, patiently laid out the facts. The city's confirmation, the missing alarms, the near disaster. Brenda's face, slowly but surely, deflated. From my holding cell, which thankfully had a view of the interrogation room, I couldn't resist a few sarcastic remarks. "Hope the curb appeal was worth it, Brenda," I yelled. She just glared at me, her face a mask of furious indignation. "Bet those bylaws feel pretty silly now, huh?" The tsunami, thankfully, turned out to be less catastrophic than initially feared for our specific area. Mark's warning, loud and clear, had made all the difference. There was some minor flooding, property damage to the beachside homes, but no serious injuries or fatalities in Seabreeze Cove. A collective sigh of relief swept through the town. My house, being a few blocks back and slightly elevated, was spared any significant damage beyond a few fallen fences. Weeks later, the neighborhood was in recovery mode. My house needed some repairs, mostly exterior stuff. A new fence, some landscaping, a fresh coat of paint where the salty spray had stripped it away. And that meant dealing with contractors. Oh, the contractors. It was a whole new level of exasperation. First came Gary, the overly enthusiastic contractor. He bounded into my garage, clipboard in hand, beaming. "Mark, my man, heard you're the horn hero. We'll get you fixed up right. Ever thought about a smart home system, fully integrated? Motion sensor lighting for those late-night horn incidents. And for your fence, I'm thinking artisanal, hand-carved redwood, imported from sustainable forests in Transylvania." He tried to upsell me on everything, using jargon, Mark, as a marine mechanic who knows the difference between a bolt and a screw, saw right through. "Gary, I just need a fence. A plain, regular fence that keeps dogs in and solicitors out." Then there was Honest Abe, the buddy contractor. He showed up with a stained t-shirt and a wink. "Heard you need some work, Mark. My cousin Vinny knows a guy. We can do it real cheap, real fast. No permits, no inspections, just good old-fashioned American elbow grease. We'll even throw in a new mailbox, just like the one Brenda used to have, real sturdy-like." Shady didn't even begin to cover it. I politely declined his offer, picturing the ensuing legal nightmares. Finally, I ended up with Miss Albright, the bureaucratic contractor. She arrived with a briefcase and a stack of forms taller than my golden retriever. "Mr. Mark," she stated, her voice as dry as sandpaper, "for your fence, we require triplicate copies of the HOA Architectural Review Board approval, a detailed topographical survey of your property, a signed affidavit from 3 non-related neighbors confirming the prior existence of said fence, and a blood sample." Okay, maybe not the blood sample, but it felt like it. Dealing with her made Brenda Sterling seem almost charming. I, ever the pragmatist, navigated these interactions with a healthy dose of sarcasm and an unwavering eye for quality work, often finding myself exasperated by the sheer inefficiency and bizarre demands of the whole process. It made me reminisce fondly about the honest, straightforward simplicity of boat engines. You fix a boat engine, it runs. You deal with a contractor, you get a headache. In the weeks that followed, the dust settled, both literally and figuratively. I was initially treated as a local eccentric, the horn guy, someone to be pointed at and whispered about. But as the full scope of Brenda Sterling's actions came to light, and as the minimal damage in Seabreeze Cove was contrasted with the more severe destruction in neighboring towns, the narrative shifted. I became, almost grudgingly, a hero. People started waving at me from their yards, their initial shock replaced by sheepish gratitude. Some even brought me casseroles, though I suspect half of them were just curious to get a closer look at the infamous Mark. Occasionally, someone would shout from across the street, "Nice horn, Mark!" or "Heard you saved us, Mark!" I tried to downplay it, mumbling about just doing what needed to be done, but secretly, I was a little chuffed. It felt good to be recognized for something other than my perpetually unkempt lawn. Brenda Sterling, predictably, resigned in disgrace from the HOA. The organization itself underwent a major overhaul, with new, more reasonable leadership. They even, to my absolute horror, nominated me for a position on the Community Safety and Preparedness Committee. I declined immediately, with a shudder. No offense, I told the new president, a far more approachable woman named Sarah, but I've done my part for community safety. Besides, I prefer to work outside the system. The Coast Guard horn, surprisingly, was returned to me after I paid a small fine for noise pollution. The officers, in their report, chalked it up to exceptional circumstances. It sits in my garage now, cleaned and polished, a silent reminder of the day I saved a neighborhood from a Karen and a tsunami. Today I am back in my garage, tinkering with the salty siren. The sun sets over the ocean, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. The water, calm and beautiful now, laps gently against the shore. I look out at the neighborhood, mostly repaired, life returning to its predictable rhythm. A faint, mischievous smile plays on my lips. I glance at the horn, gleaming silently in the corner. Maybe I give it a tiny, almost imperceptible toot, just to remind myself and maybe the universe that I've still got it. Who knew a Coast Guard horn could be such a good neighbor? I muse aloud, a glint in my eye, as the last rays of sunlight dip below the horizon. The irony isn't lost on me. Sometimes the loudest voice isn't the one of authority, but the one that truly needs to be heard. And sometimes you just gotta make some noise to get things done.